Welcome to the Mad Ones. I'm your sure I may not have a job, but I sure have fun host, Cam Harless. And joining me today as my co-hosts are two people because I thought both of them could bring something really fun and cool to the table. And I know how excited Ryan is. So tonight I've got Ryan Burgett being one of my wonderful guest co-hosts, as well as my buddy Zachary Cooper, and I gave Ryan a nickname too, but I forgot to say it just now, which is Ryan Loves Creed Burgett. So
right on.
And who doesn't love Creed? To be honest, I am trying to get in touch with Scott Stapp so that I can have him on the show, and I have had no luck yet, but I'm gonna figure it out.
Mark Tremonti is a great guitarist.
He is. That is true. But before we get to the show, I'm really excited about this show because I heard of our guest when I was reading a book called The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser, which is like a paradigm shattering book when you're reading these concepts for the first time. These theological concepts just break, like the idea of there being, and we'll get into it more, but the idea of there being watchers and just any spiritual being watching just freaks me out. So like, getting past that learning was really cool. But this dude writes a lot of books. So, but before we get to that, I do want to let everyone know this show is 100% brought to you by the fans, all 6 of you. Fans and patrons. So hit like, subscribe, share the show with your friends. There are all sorts of topics we've covered, and it's just going to keep going. We're just going to keep talking to people that I want to talk to and have fun with. It was so cool because when I was talking to Coop earlier today, he was so excited about this episode, and I'm like, that's me every week.
I am.
Every week.
I truly am. Like this is, as I was studying Mr. Godawa's just reading up on his page and looking at some of the things he put out there. And there's a book of his, because I run in apologetic circles, I had already heard about. And I was just like, that is so cool. I can't, I'm excited about this now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have something like that for myself every week, and it's going to connect with someone every week, I hope. But if you want to help us out, if you want to join my mission, you can go to patreon.com/themadOnes and support us there. We also do Zoom hangouts, stuff like that in the interim when I'm not making horrible content that no one likes but me. But if you would like to help in another way, I do make shirts. I'm going to be dropping a new tank top in the next couple of hours, which is going to be exciting. Ryan may not like tank tops as much as I do, but there's an inside joke tank top, and you're going to love it. So that's it. That's all I've got. Hit like, subscribe, do all the things. Share with your friends. Just share with your friends. It'll help us all out. But let's get to the meat and bones. Meat and bones, meat and potatoes. Either way, there's meat. Joining us tonight is a man who may somehow have written more books than N.T. Wright at this point, and I don't know how that's possible. He has written a myriad of books. He does lectures. He talks about the most interesting thing in the world, at least to me. So joining us tonight is the screenwriter of To End All Wars starring Kiefer Sutherland, the author of the Nephilim Chronicles, as well as so many other books, and a guy I definitely want to be friends with, Mr. Brian Godawa. How you doing?
Hey!
The man, the myth, the legend. He's here.
Oh, by the way, but technically, if you divide up N.T. Wright's 800-page books into more reasonable page number books, he'll have more books than me.
That's true.
Because
the humility is awesome.
So no, I'm really excited to talk to you. Like I said briefly in the intro, I read The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser a couple of years ago. And around the same time, I think Ryan told me, oh, there's a guy named Brian Godawa who writes books based on, the Deuteronomy 32 worldview, Genesis 6. And I was like, that's fascinating. I need to read that. But I'm way too ADHD to actually get around to doing anything. But I recently dug into it and read Noah Primeval, and I was thrilled the whole time I was reading that book, Brian. Like, I am duly impressed. And you said you haven't thought about it in 10 years. And I'm like, this is new to me. How could this be 10 years for you since you've thought of it? But thank you for coming on the show. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to tell people about yourself before we kind of dive into the the conversation, but
No, that's good. Yeah. Well, actually, I also discovered Michael Heiser, but I discovered him before he was famous because he was actually just, I don't know where he was in his scholarly career, but he was working at Logos, I think, Bible software company. And I actually discovered the Unseen Realm online before it was called Unseen Realm. It was called The Myth That Was True, I think, something like that. And he was just working on it over a few years, and so it was just free online PDF, and I'm like, oh, this is cool, and I was doing the research for a movie script actually about Noah that I was working on, and that's when I discovered that his work, and it just transformed my whole understanding of the Bible without without changing Yahweh and God in the center of it, etc. But and it explained, it was the first really sort of evangelical and orthodox attempt at explaining a lot of the weird stuff that I had read in the Bible, because I've been a Christian for decades, and so I was familiar with all the weird passages, right? And all of them from Genesis 6:1 to 4. That was the most weird. That was the weirdest one of all, right?
yeah.
But a lot of the occultic ones and stuff like that. And so his work actually was the inspiration for me in writing all my series. So his theologies would open my eyes, like Elisha's servant. Opened his eyes that he might see the heavenly realm and stuff. And when it did that, and then plus, he brought out this storyline of the Nephilim, and how it wasn't just, these aren't just oddities, but they're all connected in a storyline. And that was what blew my mind, that made me go, oh, there's more here than this Noah novel. Well, it was a script at first, and I found out Darren Aronofsky was making his movie, and I knew, okay, I'm not going to be able to get my movie made. So I just converted it into a novel in order to beat him to the punch, and because I was worried that maybe that he would have had some similar things that I discovered, and of course he didn't. Thank God.
Were the good guys.
Lord.
The good guys protecting everyone from God.
Yes, exactly.
Talk about flipping things.
The rock
upside
monsters, and so
Have to know what you thought of that though when you saw that movie. Like, what was your
Noah with his bow and arrow going through the woods at the beginning hunting?
Yeah. Well, the visual side of that was cool, right? Because I mean, in some ways, the visualization of that was cool, and I like that, but I actually had gotten a hold of the script when it was being made, so I wrote an article on it that went viral on Breitbart. And it was an analysis of the script, and basically, I could see right off the bat that it was a environmentalist parable, turning the Noah story into an environmentalist parable. So it was earth worship, and so I wrote all about that, and it got a lot of attention and stuff. So
I believe I read that.
Yeah, you probably did, because it got out there. Because it was, the debate was huge about Noah.
Yeah.
Of course, that wasn't even, in some ways, well, that was, of course, that is one of the worst components of it. But obviously, making Noah out to be more compassionate than the Creator, and making him a crazy madman and all that kind of stuff, obviously. But the deeper philosophy of what was going on there was definitely rooted in his atheistic environment, earth worship, So
he's obsessed with biblical themes, though. Like, I haven't watched Mother, but everything that I've heard about that is just he's trying to retell Genesis in different ways, but making it awful and atheistic.
Yeah, well, he reminds me a lot of Paul Schrader. Paul Schrader is he's the guy that wrote Taxi Driver from, obviously so long ago, but it's such a classic. And then he ended up, even more recent years, he's done The Exorcist 3, which was actually pretty good. And he also writes from he was a Christian at one time, some kind of a Christian, and he's rejected it all, but he also puts in these religious themes as well. And sometimes they're just they're positive, but in more recent years, I've noticed his films become more negative about the faith, and so there are there are many people in Hollywood who are making movies, and they are deeply influenced by scriptural themes, even if they're not Christians, for sure.
So let continue. I'm sorry. I just when I think of Aronofsky now, I'm like, wow, what a terrible understanding of scripture that man has.
Yeah. He doesn't make a lot of good movies either. I mean, some of them have been good. The Wrestler was good, but a lot of his stuff is just sort of self-indulgence and such. And I actually thought Mother was pretty self-indulgent. There was some creativity to it, et cetera. But yeah, it was definitely an attempt to smash the patriarchy, which is what the Bible is, that kind of thing. So,
Hey, want to bring up, this was my first book that I read, Hollywood Worldviews, back in 2002. I bought it when it came out. It was at the Christian bookstore. I thought, that looks interesting. I'll read that.
it was the first one of its kind.
That was wonderful, man. But as I was rereading it, in preparation for us talking here, it was fun because I was reminded of how many of the themes of that stuck with me all this time. I loved how you talked about art. You talked about how basically all art comes from, it's the image of God inside of us, and art is kind of how we let that out. So how when you look at art, any type of art, good art, bad art, this art, that art, all art, you could find those elements of, of God inside of it. That was cool. And that's been my philosophy ever since then, as I'm watching things, listening to things, like finding those, even if they're trying to tell the wrong message, you can find the good stuff. But also story. I love your passion for storytelling, like the whole concept of traditional story arc, and redemption, and a hero who learns something along the way. And because of what he learns, you reach the end of the movie. Like, that's good. But yeah, great movie or great book. I still judge movies based on your criteria you gave in here.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, it's funny because that was at a time when I was developing my aesthetic, which is my philosophy of beauty, as it applies to my art. And I've been a visual artist, not just a writer. So I've been a visual artist all my life. And in fact, that's where I got my degree was in illustration. But so I do have an appreciation for that. But the thing about it is that at the time there weren't really, there's a lot of books like that now out, but at the time there wasn't any. And I was working out my aesthetic. And what that means is I was studying storytelling in Hollywood in order to better my craft in screenwriting at the time. And so all the story gurus, they kind of they're saying the same thing but with different words and overlays and overlappings and stuff like that. My conclusion is that they all fit together. So they're not all that different. However, my desire was to understand it in relation to the Bible, in relation to God's word and him as creator. And that's where I finally began to discover my understanding of God's imagination in the scriptures, and how a lot of what these Hollywood storytellers are saying is actually rooted in a Western storytelling, which is rooted in, by and large, the Bible, right? Judeo-Christianity. And so that's why the Western storytelling paradigm is so powerful, is precisely because it has those redemptive arcs and sacrifice and all that kind of stuff. And so in some ways, the actual structure of storytelling itself is an apologetic for God, In other words, if you were to tell a story that would reflect if you're an atheist and you try to tell a story that reflects your belief that ultimately design is an illusion and everything at base is randomness and chance, right? If you were to tell a story that, it would not be an interesting story because it would be random and chance, right? And so even the act of crafting a story reflects God's creative nature in the way that he also, through his providence, creates characters. He's the God of history, right? He is sovereign. He is telling his story, and he's interacting with his creatures, and they're characters in the story, and they have true value and dignity. However, he's still ultimately the one in control, exactly like I am when I'm writing my stories, right? And they have their free will as creatures, but mystically speaking, right? God is still the one in control. Somehow he's the one sovereign. And that's how I am when I'm writing my story. I'm letting the characters be who they are, but I created them who they are to begin with, So
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, it was an interesting time of my life where I was putting that stuff down, And then later on, in more recent years, I've written a couple books about one called The Imagination of God, and the other one is called God Against the Gods. And those are looking at the Bible itself and examining its creative structure and storytelling and such. And that's where I developed the next sort of phase of my understanding, which is this notion of subversion and incarnation. So two approaches in storytelling particularly, but I think it applies to art, is incarnation. That is, the story incarnates your worldview or your meaning that you're trying to communicate, right? And this is, and how to do that is the difficulty, right? But it's in the same way that Jesus is the Word incarnate, right? He's both image and word, right? Equalized. Well, that's what I was trying to develop, and also to understand how there are a lot of pagan imagery. There's a lot of pagan imagery in the Bible, but it's been appropriated by God and reused and reinvested with new meaning for his own purposes. Such as one of my classic examples, which I've written a whole book on now, is Leviathan and Behemoth, right? But many Christians believe Leviathan is a dinosaur or just a symbol or whatever. But I do think that it's definitely a symbol of chaos that all the ancient religions had. And I explained
Tiamat.
that. Yes, Tiamat, exactly. And but in fact, Canaan had a Leviathan. Their word was the same as Leviathan. It's called Lotan in Canaanite, but it's the same equivalent of Leviathan. And so the idea here is that God actually, through his chosen prophets and such, his writers, he repurposes, so to speak, a lot of these pagan imagination ideas, and some Christians think, well, no, it's original with God, and sure, that's all creativity. You can ultimately goes back to God as an origin, but in terms of a strictly historical sense, the Jews drew from they were drawing from their Egyptian and Canaanite and Mesopotamian context when they were writing their stories, and they used that mythological symbol of Leviathan as a notion of chaos that God, the creator, pushes back in order to establish his created order.
Yeah.
And so that's the God against the gods notion, is this idea of how does God redeem pagan, what we call pagan imagery. In other words, I don't believe that these, some things might be wrong, like pornography, right? But other things like vampires, right?
Yeah.
Can Christians tell vampire stories? Well, of course they can, because it's a symbol for something else, and you can invest that symbol with any meaning. And incidentally, this is what the world has been doing for millennia. The world subverts our stories, right? It takes Noah, retells Noah, and invests it with an atheism. It takes the story of the Exodus with Exodus, Gods and Kings, written and directed by atheists, and it invests it with a new atheistic interpretation. So part of who we are as human beings is we draw from the cultural milieu, the images, the imagination, the symbols that we are born into and that we swim around in our culture, right? We draw from those and we reinvest them with meaning into our stories, and that's kind of the big picture of the sort of some of the ideas that I've communicated in those books.
Well, I love hearing you talk about all this. I studied film in college before I just ended up with a biblical studies degree, because that's where my storied mind went to. Is I just want to learn more about the Bible. I want to learn more about Jesus. I want to learn more about these things. And ancient cosmology has been one of the most fascinating points of study for me over the last year or two. I love hearing about this stuff. And it's like you mentioned, the Bible subverts these ideas. And I had a conversation with someone not that long ago who was like, I don't care if you're a young earth creationist or you're into deistic evolution or whatever. I don't care. I don't think that's the point of Genesis. Genesis is a polemic in a sense. It's a setting of the record straight. It's a taking the mythology, which goes far beyond the Semitic regions. Like I saw that you were doing some books on the Egyptian mythology, and I'm like, I want to see you hit the Norse gods at some point, because that's so fast. so fast. Because you said Lotan, and my brain went to the Jotun, which are these chaotic frost giants. And so it's like there are all of these connections within these pantheons and within these myths that you can tell they're all coming from the same place.
Yeah.
The same liars are telling the same types of stories throughout history and throughout cultures. And it's, I love hearing you talk about that.
Yeah, when I was more of a hyper literalist Christian, where I thought that the Bible, whatever the Bible was literally saying, that's what it means, though when you would discover these mythological origins or concepts that predated the Bible, like Leviathan predates the Bible by hundreds, thousands of years. That would be troublesome, and you'd always try to find some way to sort of explain it away, and there are some good answers in terms of, for example, the flood stories that were around before the Bible. Well, it's true that if there was a true flood event, then it doesn't matter when you wrote about it. The point is that you would expect there to be multiple versions of the story based on people's cultures, and that used to be a difficulty. It's not so much anymore, but that's one example of how it works. And that was a transforming moment for me, because that allowed me to be able to read and appreciate these other pagan cultures, but in context with the Bible. And the other element was, and it would make sense that if angels really did come down from heaven in time and space, it would make sense that we would see examples of the gods mating with women, right, in many mythological stories. And so that no
Zeus
longer,
was all over the place.
All of it.
We certainly do. We definitely do.
So, and the point is that the question is not, and of course, then the atheist or the secular mind would then say, yes, see, this proves evolution. We show that it evolves from older cultures, and then they pick it up and they adapt it to their own culture, and then finally the Jews picked it up and they adapted it, right? And of course, there is some of that. There is some of that borrowing that is real, and you can't deny. The Jews were, even though they were invested with God's Holy Spirit, the writers, they were still people of their time, just like we are, and they were drawing in their human side from the concepts that they were familiar with. And so when you understand that picture in that way, then the whole mythology thing is no longer a scary enemy. It's actually a friend. And you just have to seek to understand, okay, how does this make sense within the context of the biblical view, which is that they distorted it because of their sin. And you could, but then interestingly, sometimes these pagan ideas, at least their version of it, can help illuminate some things we don't know in the scriptures, at least in terms of how they understood it in that day, So you read about things like, there's a lot of examples of it. Leviathan is one, but also some of these problems that people have with the Bible where, hyperbole or descriptions of destructions of cities, and it's described as stars falling from the sky and the sky rolling up like a scroll and all this stuff, and yet it's describing a historical event back in the Old Testament, and you find the same language in other ancient mythologies. And the point of it is that they all use the cosmos, the what we would call the not the cosmos, what we would call the stars and the sun and the moon. what we call the cosmos, they used as their understanding of the spiritual realm. It was intersecting with the spiritual realm. And so for them, when they described a city being destroyed, it was like the stars are falling because the gods are also falling with the city, because they saw a connection between the earthly realm of kings and men and the heavenly realm of the gods or angels or what have you, right? And so these are things that are common, and that's one of the reasons why I think Heiser's work has been so influential, bringing this back to the divine council. You know, the divine council is in scripture in many places, you know, Psalm 82, Psalm 89, lots of them. And I think Christians can misinterpret the Bible when they seek to understand it only within its own context and not within the context in which the ancient world in which it came out of, because you can miss what it means and you could end up importing your own cultural understanding. Like, for instance, you know, he stands around the council of the gods, etc., in Psalm 82, and it's like, you know, oh well, maybe this is these are symbolic of the earthly rulers being called gods because they represent God. You know, this is a way that they seek to make sense of it only within the biblical context without understanding it has a broader context. And when you see, other nations, of course, had a divine council motif in all their language, then you have to be a little bit more humble and say, well, maybe, you know, I get it. I'm sola scriptura in terms of the Bible is the final authority. However, people don't even realize that there are many biblical words. Some of them they call hapax legomena. I don't know. I can't remember the exact term, hapax legomena, but they're unique words that only appear once in the Bible. And there are many words.
Koitoi.
Yeah.
Paul's word.
That's a portmanteau. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are many Hebrew words that they literally don't know, but they make guesses. But when we read the English Bible, we think this is what it is.
Yeah.
And it's not until you look into it, you realize, oh my gosh, they're not even sure what a lot of these words are, you know, like in various passages, like, you know, like Isaiah's passage talking about the basically the satyrs in the desert and the owls and all these, it's describing these so-called animals of the desert, but they're really not. If you look back into it, they're more demonic images, right? And so, in fact, they've even changed the satyrs, which are, you know, pan-like creatures, right? English translations have changed that to be like goats or something like that. You know, it's like, what? No. And so, yeah. So my point is that those who say, oh, only the Bible, and if you draw from other pagan sources, then that's not, that's not honoring to scripture. You know what I'm saying? Well, they don't realize that the Bible they're reading is actually influenced by other pagan cultures, because they decided on some of the decisions of these difficult words based on going into Aramaic or into the Canaanite language, which is a pagan culture, and it has, the language is rooted in its paganism, right? And so even the translations you're reading of the Bible are rooted in understanding the text in its broader ancient context. So, and I bring that up because that's becoming, you know, Heiser's view has become quite popular, and a lot of Orthodox Christians are seeking to, you know, try to, you know, answer it or discredit it or whatever. And so I do think it's important to address that, you know.
They are taking modern Christians, especially in the West, they're taking this rational worldview and trying to cram it into this supernatural book.
Yeah.
They are trying to, that's what I see. And I'm sure Cam sees it. And I'm sure, you know, it's neat to meet somebody who's been so influenced by Heiser so early.
Yeah.
Well, and not just the translators, like the characters in the Bible are influenced as well, which is something you brought up earlier. Like Abraham, God says to him, I want you to sacrifice your son. And Abraham doesn't go, are you a freak? What's wrong with you? What kind of horrific freak would tell me to murder my own child? It's like, oh, you want me to sacrifice my child?
Yes.
Okay. You know, and he heads up the mountain, because we look at that and we see God is this barbaric freak, but you look at it in the context of world he was living in. He goes, oh, Well, that's what you do. God eventually asks for that which you most value. God's asking for my child, but then he goes to the mountain and God provides, and he goes, "Wow, you're the God who provides." He just learned a truth, something new about God. God just revealed something new about him. So, in the context of the world they lived in, that's a huge message. That's amazing. God's contrasting himself with those ancient cultures. But you have to think in terms of the world he was living in order to actually catch that.
Well,
Otherwise, you're like, what's the
well,
point?
I was gonna say, not even to mention, he then gave his own son in place of. I mean, like it all ties together. It's such a
He's
beautifully
God who
written.
provides.
It's such a beautifully written book over thousands of years. Like how does that happen? How does it have that level of beauty and cohesiveness over that long a period of time? It's wild. But I do think that usually, you know, if Jessica were here right now, she'd be like, what's Genesis 6? What's Deuteronomy 32? What's Psalm 82? So I just wanted to kind of throw this out there for those who are like Nephilim. I'm just going to read that
we've
little
never
bit
used the
real
word
quick.
Nephilim yet. Nephilim.
So let me just read the bit of Genesis 6, and then I'd love to talk about the book and some of the things that I read in it that just like, I was like, dude, I think you're speaking my language in such a crazy way, because so like I said, I studied screenwriting. I've written a few scripts, but then I did biblical studies, and I haven't straight up preached. That hasn't been something that I've done, but I remember sitting down and trying to decide what I wanted to preach the first time I did it, and it was taking the Bible, and it was going to be a series, of course, because I can't be short about things. I have to be long-winded, but it was going to be breaking down the Bible into the 3-act structure and into these different little bits and pieces of story, because story is what communicates to people. And so like when you're talking, and I'm just like, our brains are very similar, and I'm thrilled to hear that someone else is thinking this way. But let me read that. So Genesis 6:1. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them that they chose. Married's not the right word, BT dubs.
Good example. Another example of that, yeah.
Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. So this, Genesis 6:4, to anyone reading that doesn't know, is just like, what is this? And so I remember hearing 3 or 4 different explanations when I was a kid that, oh no, well, this is about the sons of Seth. That's the sons of God. It's Adam's lineage through Seth. That's what this is, because we don't want to deal.
Pathetic, though.
Right. We don't want to deal with
such a
this.
sad, like, really, guys.
That's the Kool-Aid answer. That's shut up and drink the Kool-Aid. This is the answer.
Yeah.
Right. But there's so I read your book. And I just started Enoch. I was I'm not gonna lie, a little disappointed that I didn't get to keep going in the story to the next person. So I'm glad to go to Enoch though. But I was just like, oh man, I want to go past,
Yeah, some people have said that they've read Enoch first, and it's great that way. It just wasn't the way I wrote it. So I when I wrote Enoch, it had to be a prequel in a sense, Yeah.
Well, Gilgamesh is after that, and I'm just like, how's he gonna do this? I'm fascinated to figure out how you tie in Gilgamesh.
Well, if I actually, my goal was to be as close to Gilgamesh as possible, and so if you've read I recommend reading Gilgamesh, because it reads like a modern day hero story. It's just amazing, But yeah, I'm very proud of one of the things I'm most proud of is Gilgamesh, in the sense that I thought that I actually did retell the story in a very faithful way, but yet integrated into my storyline in a way that's powerful. And the problem is a lot of people may have heard of the name Gilgamesh, but like, what? That's not in the Bible. What do you?
Right.
Whatever.
Yes, he is.
Hey, and just to give some added clarification, you wrote this whole series, this fiction series about with the Bible, Noah Primeval and all these. Okay, but then you turned around and you wrote the actual book about the biblical stuff surrounding all this.
Yes.
When the Watchers were upon the earth. I have that one. I've not read the whole thing yet, but I've read part of it.
Oh, the first one's when giants were
or
upon
when
the earth.
giants. That's what it is. When giants
Yeah.
were upon the earth.
So
Yeah.
what happened was when I first started. So yeah, we're for everybody else. We're talking about the series Chronicles of the Nephilim,
Right.
available exclusively on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook.
And it's
The
free
audiobook's
to
great,
read.
by the way.
It's free to read on Kindle Unlimited right now, and I have all of the links down in the
right,
description.
Yeah,
And
all my
Enoch
books.
is first. Speaking
Yes.
of which, and that one
Technically,
they flipped it. Yeah.
yeah. So so the first novel though was Noah Primeval and then Enoch Primordial, but the series became Chronicles of the Nephilim. And when I was writing it, again, this is over 10 years ago, so I didn't, this was still new, and so a lot of people, I thought a lot of Christians would have problems with it. You know what I mean? So I thought, you know what? One of the things I loved about Michael Crichton, he would write his novels, and then at the back he would put a little appendix about explaining the real science behind his novels, and I thought, well, I'm going to do the same thing, but with my biblical and historical research. And it's the kind of thing that I thought I might appreciate that. So maybe other people would. And so at the end of each of the novels in Chronicles of the Nephilim, I do have the appendix explaining some of the research behind it. And a lot of Christians have told me that they've enjoyed that as much as the novels. And, and it's because they, some of the stuff is so wild that you've got to be thinking, where did he make this up?
Right.
And so it's helpful in that way, but it became so popular that I took all the appendixes from the novels of the series Chronicles of the Nephilim, and I put them into one book as just a Bible research book called When Giants Were Upon the Earth. That book is my best-selling book right now of all my books. And I think it's because Christians are just hungry for Bible study material on that. Although it's interesting because in some ways I feel like my storytelling is to me, it's more important than just the research. But nevertheless, I understand and I appreciate why a lot of Christians like that. So in later novels that I've written more recently, I decided to put more of my research because I was enjoying it as well. And
Is that possible?
Yes.
I've never seen a novel with the amount of footnotes you have in yours.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
So in my new series, Chronicles of the Watchers, which is basically they're standalone novels, so to speak, but they kind of fill in the gaps of Chronicles of the Nephilim. It's sort of like going back. I wrote 8 novels, Chronicles of the Nephilim, and now I've realized, there are some other stories I need to get done, like Moses. I didn't do Moses, right?
You get in my face with that, I'll beat your goddamn ass, you bitch.
Okay, sorry.
That's Alex.
Sorry. My cat
love Alex
stepped on.
Jones, but what the heck?
Sorry, my cat stepped on my soundboard, and it is on Alex Jones mode. I apologize.
That's hilarious. Well, that reveals quite a bit to me.
That is the first
all
interview
good.
you've been in with where Alex Jones is played in the middle.
Yes. Yeah.
This show is at the end of the day called The Mad Ones.
Yes, that's true. Good point.
You get a little bit of the madness.
So in Chronicles of the Watchers, I ended up having a book for each novel, an additional book of the research. It's a shorter book,
Really?
but it's more than just 50 pages. It's like 150 pages or so. And I've been enjoying writing those as much as the novels myself, and people have been loving them. Sometimes people like to read the research first because then they can appreciate and see what I'm doing with the novels because they are wild, right?
That's
some
why I
people
brought it up.
Yeah, so some people like
For
to read the
watchers
novel.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, and then go, well, where did he get that from? Oh, that's where he got it from. So, whatever. However you want to read it is fine. But yeah, that was sort of the origin of that. And I did it because I'm like that too. If I would see something bizarre or wild, I'd be going, well, where'd you get that from? So, not everybody cares, but I do.
No, I mean it's helpful because there are certain things that come up that I'm just like, I know that he's drawing from history, but holy crap.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up is and you may have to say the names because I'm terrible at this, but one of the small little pieces that I loved was your naming in Noah Primeval these characters that were tied to the gods. Because if you look at in the Bible the naming of angels and different people, you've got Ezekiel, you've got Israel, you've got Raphael, all of them ending in L. And why is that? And also look at Elijah, which is Elihu, which is taking on the name Yahweh after a certain point. And
Yeah.
so all of these names that you see in the Bible that end in L are directly tied to God and who he is. And you're named with that. I forget the word for it, but they're named with that connection to God, the God of the Bible, the
Yes.
actual real God. But then you have like I can't say the name, the priest king of and he was
Lugalanu?
Lugalanu, who's connected to the god Anu. And
Yes.
I loved
Mm.
that in his name was that same use of naming, which they did in Babylon as well.
Yes.
And the other one that really stuck out to me was Ham, who I think you said it, I think it was Kananu, which is a mixture of both the name Canaan, which is his son, which is where all the all the bad stuff goes in the future. And it also nods to Anu, this other god. And I was just like, dude, I love what you're doing. I love what you have done. This is brilliant. And I just want to gush on that for a second.
Well, let me explain it too for your readers. I'm trying to actually find in some of the books, some of the novels, I end up giving little charts because I'm doing something very specific. And why can't I find the charts? They should be there.
If it's any consolation, I didn't read the charts. So if I picked up anything cool, it was just because I'm feeling you, brother.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. Why don't I have? Hold on. Maybe it's an Abraham. So one of the things that I did was, so I knew that I knew that the Bible, I'm going to tell these stories going all the way through the Bible up to time of Jesus. And I know that, they have interacted with, the Jews were interacting with these various time periods and cultures, Mesopotamia, which is Babylon, and early Babylon and later Babylon as well. And then Canaan, which would be the Canaanites, and Ugarit and their cultures, and also, of course, Egypt as well. But because I knew that I was going to do that, my concept was this. I thought, so first of all, taking a step back, we've mentioned this already, this notion of the divine council. What is this? And this idea that there are what the Bible calls gods that are around, that God gets counseling from, and they are his sons of God. I finally found the first chart. I thought I had that chart earlier, but anyway. So, and this idea is that when the Bible uses the word God, Elohim, it doesn't mean just being that we know God. It's really more of
It's a title.
It's a title or a description of a realm of existence, a tier of existence. And so sometimes dead people are called Elohim. Gods are called, pagan gods are called Elohim. Angels are called Elohim. So what does that mean? So the idea that Heiser explains is that Elohim, like Yahweh, is the Elohim of Elohims, which means all these beings exist in this spiritual realm, this supernatural realm, whatever, to a degree. And God is in that realm as well. And he's the Elohim of Elohim. But that means there are other beings that are in that realm, and they're called Elohim in Hebrew, which means gods in English, right? So our normal English, the way we've been raised to understand monotheism is that, no, there can only be one God and all the other pagans are just false ones or whatever. But that's not the way that they spoke back then in the ancient world. And so we have to divest ourselves of our bias of this word God as only can be applied to the creator God, Yahweh, right? It can be applied to other beings is the point. And so when I first began this series and was studying, and Heiser brings out also, and then my further study was this notion of the Watchers, and these Watchers, which are in Daniel. You can read Daniel 4, and the Prince of Persia in Daniel 7, I think it is.
Prince of Greece,
etc. So there are this notion in the Bible that there are earthly entities and rulers, usually more like kings and cities or nations. There are spiritual entities that are linked to those earthly rulers, right? So that when there was so their belief was that, when the the earthly ruler had a war, there was a war in heaven. And when the earthly ruler, like when Babylon fell, then that's why they said the stars fall from the sky, because they also believed that its spiritual entity that was over Babylon also fell to the other deities of the gods or of the land that were fighting them, right? So this is a notion that was very much in the Bible and rooted in there. So, whereas we might call them more angels maybe or something like that, but the Bible calls them gods. And actually angels are different from spirits. Angels are actually, they are spirits, but they have a heavenly flesh, right? They can eat food, they can have sex with humans. And so but they're not human. And so they have they can exist in two different realms, whereas we can only exist in this one realm, or we can only sort of interact in this one realm. And so, but spirits or evil spirits or demons, not the same thing. They're not fallen angels. So learning these concepts, right? And then this notion of, well, if there are ancient rulers, if the rulers of ancient earth had spiritual entities over them, what is the point, right? And I mean, does that make any theological sense? And the key to it, of course, comes in Deuteronomy 32. And 32:8, where it says, when the Most High God gave to the nations their inheritance, and by the way, that word inheritance is rooted in a concept of land and power and such. When he divided mankind, all scholars will tell you this is a reference to Babel, right? When he divided mankind at Babel, he fixed the borders of the peoples. In other words, the nations that we read about in Genesis 10. The borders are fixed according to what? The number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted heritage. What does that mean? And, Heiser explains this, and I also go through an explanation of this as well. But the basic idea here is that the according to the Bible, there was Israel, God's people, and then the Gentile nations, everybody else. And they conceived of there being 72 or 70 Gentile nations according to Genesis 10, right? And so they always saw the Gentiles were everyone else going to hell, basically, and Jews or the Israelites would be God's people. And so this concept is that those pagan nations then, because they rejected God at the Tower of Babel, right? They kept falling away, and God finally said, okay, look, I'm going to separate you, and I'm going to place you under the authority of these sons of God that you're worshiping to some degree. And the sons of God are these spiritual beings from Genesis 6 that you read that came down from heaven and had sex with women and they bore them the Nephilim, right? So it's tied in with all that. But the idea here is that there are these spiritual entities that the Bible itself says are over each of the Gentile nations, or maybe their ruling authorities. And so my premise of Chronicles of the Nephilim was, well, the connection that I bring to the mix, the sort of like the unique original thing that I brought into this whole realm was, I thought, well, what if the gods, the ancient pagan gods that people worshiped, those gods of the nations, what if they were these sons of God that were over them, that God placed over them? And how would that operate? Well, it would make sense to me that if they're worshiping these false gods, that these beings would take on these identities for the sake of drawing worship away from Yahweh unto themselves. So you've got the Greeks worshiping Zeus, right? You've got Canaan worshiping Baal, Israel, Egypt, worshiping Ra and Horus and all this. And so the premise was, what if these entities were rooted in some demonic reality?
Yeah.
And that's not entirely made up. I actually also drew that from the Bible. Now, I'm not saying my notion and how I play it out in my novels is the way it really was, because I just don't know. And I had to speculate, and I'm writing fiction. So the point is, my novels are not historical fiction. They're theological fiction. I'm trying to tell history, but through a theological lens like the Bible does. So in Deuteronomy 32:17, he's talking about the Jews, the Israelites coming into Canaan and falling away from him, Yahweh, and worshiping these other gods. And he says, they, the Israelites, sacrificed to demons that were no gods, to gods they had never known, to new gods that had come recently, whom your fathers had never dreaded. So what he's saying here is like, they went into this new land of Canaan and they fell away from me, and they were sacrificing to these other gods, but those gods were demons. Now, the word demon shedu in Hebrew is not the same as what we think of demons now. It's more, I would say, it'd be more accurate to say they were demonic, meaning they were evil and such, because they're very different. The sons of God are different from demons and spirits and stuff like that. But the point there is still the case. And so that was the premise of the whole series. So I said, well, if I'm going to be going into all these different cultures, I'm gonna have to learn all their gods and all their and their mythologies to see how can I integrate that into my story in a way that explains it within the submission to Aslan. You know what I mean?
Right.
In other words, Aslan is the god over all those mythological types, and so. So the first, series, Enoch and Noah, it's the most ancient, so it takes place, I have it roughly around the time of ancient Sumer. So I had to find those deities of ancient Sumer, like Anu, the city of Eridu.
Inanna.
Inanna, right, exactly. And then later on in other stories, when they get into Canaan, the chief gods are different. They're Baal, Ashtart, right? But the point is a lot of these gods have a lot of cross-pollination and similarities. Some of them are actually taken from one country, brought into another. They mix and match them. And, a lot of it's made up stuff, obviously. But if there's some demonic reality to it, then I thought it would make sense if these spiritual beings, masqueraded as these ancient gods that they worshipped. And so that's sort of the premise of my story, that these ancient gods have a reality to them, but it's a spiritual deception. And they're actually these fallen sons of God that are trying to draw worship away from Yahweh. And why? What's the purpose? What's the goal? Ultimately, it's to what I call the war of the seed. They know about the coming Messiah, the one who would defeat the serpent, right? Crush the head of the serpent. And they had a sense of that, and so they were trying to stop the bloodline, basically. And that's the premise of my whole series. And that's the spiritual. They don't know all the facts about what God's doing, but they know enough to try to stop it and fight him and stop Messiah from being born. Yeah. And so that's the big story principle, but that all ties into what we originally started about with the Watchers and such. And it's not just this Watchers, giants, like strange anomalies. No, it's all tied into the theology of the scriptures, which is the thing that is so fascinating to me.
Oh, me too. I remember before I read your book, that was kind of one of the things that I'm sure Ryan can tell you. He's heard me say in the past is, what horrible gods are over America with, like different things, like, because, you see, I saw the Prince of Persia, I saw the Prince of Greece, I saw these different concepts, and I was like, there's clearly Paul talks about our enemies are not flesh and blood, but principalities and powers, rulers in the dark places. And it's like there's clearly this demonic activity going on over these nations. And so, like, when I'm reading what you've written, when I'm hearing what you're talking about right now, I'm like, this makes so much sense to me. And have you ever, and this is kind of tangential, I don't know if you'll appreciate this question or not, have you read American Gods by Neil Gaiman?
I've not read it, but I've seen the first 2 seasons of the series. Okay,
I read most of the book, but I didn't watch all of the series. But the concept of that is that when people moved to America from different regions, they brought their gods with them. And so,
now, of course, Gaiman is most likely an atheist, right? So he's operating at, these are metaphors, right? These are metaphors for the cultural values, and that's fine. I mean, I get that too, right? Yeah. So, but that's what I appreciate about that story is, you're right. He's using our concept, but he's using it as a metaphor, but it does capture a lot of what we're saying.
Yeah. What I find fascinating is, even though you're probably right. I think he is a professed atheist, but isn't it fascinating that he's still yoking onto, Christian religious concepts, and he's creating his own little religion fantasy world? Isn't
I
that
think
fascinating?
So I think he's right.
Yeah. I mean, think the Freemasons put Astra in New York Harbor. I mean, I hate to say it, and we, conspiracy theorists talk about it all the time, but there you go.
Yeah.
The guy, the Lady Libertas is Ashra, and so the cross pollination is not it's very real.
Don't even bring up Washington D.C.
Oh
Yeah.
That is literally a Masonic.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Wild. I love this conversation. I'm so happy that we're here right
Which,
now.
incidentally, we on Derek Gilbert's show, we have a group of us that meet once a month online, and he tapes it, and it's Iron and Myth, and it's these guys are like smarter than me, so I love sitting and talking with them. But we talk about these issues as well. And the last one we talked about was this notion of the Watchers and the territorial authorities in movies and TV, and we talked a little bit about American Gods, and we also talked a lot about Marvel, and obviously superheroes. Of course, we've all, I've been saying for decades that superheroes are kind of a god substitute, but now I'm convinced that it's not just metaphorical, like in a secular culture or man's religious impulse. We tend to tell stories that sort of reflect that religious notion of gods and men who are greater than us, but in a God sense, But now I feel like it's coming to a very negative culmination, and they're becoming more explicitly religious in Marvel, right?
Dude, did you see Eternals?
Yes, exactly.
Dude,
that was pretty much the anti-you. It's amazing. It is the anti-you.
That blew my mind hearing the name. Well, slightly different, but Tiamat.
Yeah, and Gilgamesh and all that. Yeah. So my point is they're becoming more explicit about it. And again, it's not so much that it's not. How can I say it? Like I don't think that they're deliberately, I think they're just driven by this sort of this this Hegelian historical move. And it's just like, it will become we use more religious themes. It's not real to them. But what I'm saying is, it's not that they're trying to get us back to some other religions or something like that. It's just that man is a religious creature. And without religion, you ultimately have to create more religions and to substitute in your need for God. And that's what Marvel has become for our secular culture. And I think it's becoming really bad. I don't think it's a good thing. I used to, I say it's not like sinful to watch a superhero movie, but my point is that it's becoming the religion. It's becoming the carrier of the cultural values and aspirational beliefs of our culture, that these godlike beings are the scientific replacement for God, so to speak, right? And so, of course, they're not all scientific, but you know what I mean. It's the modern secular version of it, And to them, it's like, it's not religion, but it really is. That's the thing. It's a religion. Superheroes are a religion.
It's like you don't have to be committed, so it's non-committal. Mythology is what it is.
Yeah.
And one thing.
Go ahead.
I'll point out based on what you said before, you can kind of see the Christianity through these themes of redemption and of growth. But what do we see in movies like Frozen? We see anti-redemption. We see they have identified those Christian themes and they are viciously attacking them all right now, aren't they? And I'm sure you who have a background in screenwriting have seen that. They are now trying to, you are just fine the way you are.
Yep.
You were already equipped. Rey of Star Wars.
Yeah.
She was fully equipped from the moment that she has no character arc. She has no redemption.
She's woke.
She's awesome. She's woke and she's great. And that's
well, it's like that.
Right there.
But there's a big problem. She's white. So I'm sorry, you guys. But that makes Star Wars a racist part of the racist patriarchy that internalizes the oppression. And
Man, well, it's like that new Thor movie. I watched it and I was so frustrated because it's like, they've taken, because I do think that you're right. At some point, it was just kind of fun mythology kind of thing, but now it's like they have to make their stupid freaking points all the time. Stop making I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
Because like I have a little Mjolnir here on my arm, and it has
Oh.
nothing to do with the Thor the god. It's just like it looks cool. I like it.
Yeah.
You know, I like hammers. Whatever.
I get it.
But
You have one hanging on the wall behind you.
I do. But no, it's like I watched that freaking movie and I was just like, you know, it wasn't even the most preachy of them. But
Yeah.
at the same time, they put enough preaching in there for me to be like,
Yes.
you've messed up this movie. It's no
Yeah.
longer what I came for.
Yeah, I'm just not interested in Marvel anymore. And you know, they're building you know, it's all about the Marvel universe. See, that's the mythology. They're building a complete narrative that is a meta narrative to explain the world. And this is where they want to get their spiritual hunger satisfied from the imagination. Because that's all they have. That's all they believe in, right? There's nothing transcendent. So this is becoming the God substitute that it's not a good thing.
Yeah,
They even
it's
make-
so gay.
If you're a big fan of Thor Ragnarok, like I was, because I thought
Dude.
Thor Ragnarok was just
That was
fabulous.
a fantastic movie.
Did you catch the retcon? Spoiler alert, don't care. If you didn't see either one, sorry. But did you see that in Thor Ragnarok, the rock guy, I'm sorry, I forget his name right now.
Korg.
He's Korg. Korg said, I had a mother. But then in the new movie, there's a whole different narrative for how their
Yeah.
people reproduce.
Oh,
So
And I'm just
gay.
gonna leave it at that. Just gonna
But once again, the
but
biggest
at the same time.
they're I mean, they're putting all this other stuff in, like you said, it's their worldview becoming flesh. But yeah, it's just bad stories though. They don't even
Yeah, that's the thing.
try and tell good stories. There's no
Yeah.
real arc to it. There's no real hero. There's no lesson learned that makes them reach the
Or-
conclusion and find redemption.
Or
There's
it's
nothing.
woke. It's all about
Yeah.
the wokeness. And yeah, I couldn't make past like 15 minutes of Thor. It was the new Thor. It was just so ridiculous to me. They're
the
all
best
just
part-
ridiculous.
The best part of that dadgum new movie was the last 5 minutes.
Oh, really?
The last 5 minutes, I would have watched an entire movie of that crap. But the rest of it, I didn't care about it
I agree.
whatsoever.
I thought
but
Christian Bale's
I-
character was great.
I was
But
going to say,
oh, did you watch
sorry,
it?
Cam, don't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. Go for it.
I was moving on past Thor.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
let's-
I was gonna
I
say-
was just gonna say before we move on past
Back
Thor
to
and
the
Marvel. I was just gonna say for me, the frustrating thing with Marvel is like there's some good movies interspersed within these kind of
Yes.
half-ass movies.
Yeah.
But the one that really stuck me is like, okay, so it's over. Wasn't Endgame. It wasn't Infinity War. It was freaking Guardians of the Galaxy 2, where I was like sitting there the whole time, and I'm sure you understand this, Brian. Where's the primary external goal? What is the goal of this movie? Like
Yeah.
when I'm sitting there looking at my watch going, okay, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so we're done. Marvel's done. And that's where I am. So go ahead, John.
Yeah.
Not Josh. Why did I call you Josh? Ryan.
Well, I was going to say, you've been consistent, Brian, for, at least 20 years on this. The whole concept of, stories are what's inside coming out, So you were in here, you were putting it to movies. You were saying, hey,
Yeah.
here, movies, what story, what is coming out? What is being communicated here through this story?
Yeah.
But like you were saying, what inspired you, kind of your hook with Noah Primeval and the Chronicles of the Nephilim, it's still the same thing. You did what so many people, especially Christians, that we don't do. I mean, mythology it's the definition, it's people, how people explain things they can't understand, how
Yes.
they put into words what can't be, what they don't really get. Okay.
Right.
But they come from something. If that's the definition, that means there's something behind it. So what's behind it? And there's way more non-Christians who ask that question than Christians. And coming at it from a biblical worldview and asking those questions, that is so unique and that is so cool.
Yeah.
And
So when you
I love that.
each novel you read, when you how can I put it? Like, so for instance, the story of Abraham, right? So he takes place around Babylon, and I link him into the time period where Nimrod's still around. There's scholarly speculation about that. Who knows? But I have him in the time of Nimrod because there are some ancient Jewish, tales that have him in the time of Nimrod, right? So I do that. but the things that occur with the gods in my stories, in each of the novels, I try to make them based on what's happening in the spiritual realm. I base it on what's, as much as possible, on the mythologies of that world. So, for instance, in my latest novel is Moses against the gods of Egypt. And so you've got these gods of Egypt, and I have them follow the Book of the Dead, Egyptian Book of the Dead. Now that's the Book of the Dead is actually about your journey into the afterlife and such. And I have that journey in the story based on the Book of the Dead. It's not real. Let me just put it this way. It's a spiritual reality. It's really cool the way I dealt with it. And all the gods that are in there, they're not just doing things. I'm like what Horus is trying to do and what Set is trying to do is based on ancient Egyptian stories and mythology as much as possible. So when you're watching my books, and particularly all the ones that happen in Canaan, right, which will be Joshua Valiant, Caleb Vigilant. These are the conquering of the Canaanite tribes. The conquering, and I draw from the mythology of ancient Baal, the Baal story, the Baal epic. There's a whole huge book as big as the Bible about Baal, right? And so I draw from his stories and have him doing those things in this story. And so you are gonna learn a little bit about the kind of mythology that it is. But yeah, like you said, it's ultimately though at the service of the scriptural worldview. So
well, it comes from something. You're asking where did these come? What's being communicated here?
I'm not that original.
Well, if you're going to go by that, then the Bible's not that original either. But it's everything fits together. It's nifty, but yeah, it's fun.
We have to. Oh, I'm sorry.
Ahead. No, go ahead.
We have to touch on your background. I'm a writer. Cam is a writer. You're a writer. I don't know, Brian. Are you a writer yourself? I don't know. But I wanted to talk. I had to ask at least a question about like your background as a writer. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it screenwriting first? What kind of like your journey as a writer?
Sure.
Like getting published. That's awesome stuff, and that's something I think as a fantasy writer guy myself, I'd love to hear about.
So I started out as a visual artist, and but interestingly, in college, as a Christian, I've always had a passion to bring the gospel to the lost. And in college, I was so desperate to share the gospel that I wanted to do it creatively because I love creativity. And so we had a drama team that we went out on the free speech area and we would just do skits, and we base them on Monty Python stuff and make up our own, but a lot of it was all spiritual skits and stuff intended to get conversation going. So and I realized that I had to write them and act in them, and I really enjoyed that, right? So I got my degree in illustration, graphic design. Ultimately, is what I went into. But when I was in college, I actually studied Francis Schaeffer. He's an old evangelical theologian. He's deceased, but his work changed my life in terms of understanding how my art worked with my worldview and my Christianity and how to integrate them. Because until that time, there were two separate things. I didn't know how to put them together. And I was watching movies, and I really loved movies, and I began to see and understand movies from a worldview perspective because of Francis Schaeffer and H.R. Rookmacher. And I started getting a burden and a desire. Like sometimes I would start to cry at a movie because I would see how powerful its secular theme was, and thinking, I want God's theme to be up there on the screen in a powerful way.
That's awesome.
Right?
And that inspired me to look into movies. But the thing was, I knew a little bit about the artist's life, and I knew that as a graphic designer, I could have an okay job and be fine. But a lot of other artistic endeavors are starving artists, right? And I knew Hollywood was about that. And as I looked into it, and I realized, well, you know what? I'm going to just do it on the side, and I'm going to learn about screenwriting on my own. I'm not going to go to college, spend all this money to whatever.
Waste of money.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd already graduated from college anyway, so I had my degree and such, and I got married, So I was doing it on the side, learning screenwriting on the side. I did it for many years, and before I got my first movie made, which was To End All Wars, 2001.
I have so many questions.
But in that time period, so that's when I was like studying storytelling for Hollywood. And then, like I said, around the end of that was when I got inspired to, well, let me put this down into a book. And that was right around the time that my first movie came out, To End All Wars. And so interestingly, I was a nobody until I got a movie made. Then I'm like, I go to university and I'm like, okay, well, you wrote a movie in Hollywood that's got made. So I pitched them my book and they took it. And so they would have taken, they would never, I'm the same person I always was, but because I had accomplishments, and that's how that works.
Yeah. You had Jack Bauer on your side.
Yeah. So I had the respect of accomplishment, and that's what enabled me to get published. And then after that time, I had one other book that I published that did not do well at all with InterVarsity. But so that was that. And then I focused on the screenwriting. And then, so I had a day job, but I learned early on from people in the business, you got to get out to LA. That's where the action is. You can't, there are some rare cases where people sell a screenplay from somewhere else, but you got to be around the action. You got to be, it's about meeting people, knowing people, who you know and stuff. It really is legit. So I got a job out in California. My wife and I moved out there, and from then I was there for 30 years actually. So
wow.
So we got that first movie made, and I was developing my career in that. And so what happened was, when the movie got made, you think, oh, that's a breakthrough. Now I'm going to get all these jobs. And well, it didn't happen. The director did well, but nothing happened for me. And it was like having to start over at square one. I literally had to beat the streets again to get people to read my scripts. And there were a few people I was able to contact, and they're like, oh yeah, I liked your movie. And one guy, I got the job for The Visitation, adapting Peretti's novel, The Visitation. I got that because the guy saw To End All Wars and thought I was a good writer. But other than that, it's almost like you're starting all over again. It doesn't just come to you and you're a superstar, And so
I know how that goes.
Yeah,
in this venue.
Yeah. So for the next 10 years, then I was doing graphic. I quit my day job because I had freelancer design clients. So I did that so that I could have free time to write when I needed to write for a movie, right? And so for the next 10 years, I was doing less and less graphic design, and I was getting a little bit more and more writing work. And that's kind of how it worked. And then, by some point, I was only, mostly just, I still do design, like I design my own book covers and stuff, but I don't do it for pay. And at some point then, maybe within those 10 years, I kind of became full-time screenwriting, but it was still abysmal for an income. And then it got so bad a couple of years that right around 2010, where I thought, it's not working. And so I've got to expand my horizons. And by the way, this isn't unusual. It happens to a lot of people too. You can be good and still have difficulty. So that was when I decided to start writing novels.
Yeah.
And the Noah Primeval was my first novel. And it was...
That was your first one?
Yes.
You killed it, bro.
You can say that again.
It's been rewritten several times. That's the benefit of self-publishing, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Noah Primeval was on the wave of Kindle when Kindle was first exploding, and it did really well, and I made good money. I thought, but interestingly, before I did that, I self-published that. But I went around with my Noah novel, tried to get an Christian agent, and tried to contact. Couldn't get one. Couldn't get a Christian publisher to take it on. Some of them looked at it, but it was just too weird for them. They don't understand originality, and it's too risky and all that. I get it. Plus, they were a little bit more R-rated when I first came out. And
I want to read those versions.
No, it really was unnecessary. It really was. It's not a moral issue for me. It's more of a creative. But I realized that the Christian audience is my main audience, and you can imply something powerfully, creatively without being explicit, and I'm actually happy with that. I'm fine.
Yeah.
However, there is always a little bit of edginess to them. I might have a couple of bad words in there once in a while because you have to show that evil, you know.
Right.
So anyway, no one would take it. But self-publishing was just growing, and I thought, well, I might as well. I can't do it any other way. Well, it proved to be the best thing in my life because I'm making far better income as a self-published author now after 10 years. It only took like 5 years to get up to a really good income, and like I wouldn't. I wouldn't write another book for InterVarsity because I make far more money on my own than I do with that Hollywood Worldviews book. By the way, is still selling really well after 20 years, and the pittance that I get for royalties, I know they're making a lot of money, right? But now I'm making all the royalties, and you know it's like 50 to 70% royalties at the end of the day. You know, when you take into account everything, it's about 50 to 70% depending on the books, you know, whether it's audiobook or Kindle, blah, blah, blah. And whereas you make like 10% or less with a traditional publisher. So I would not be able to make a living with a traditional publisher anyway, because I'm not a superstar, you know, I don't sell millions, right? So, but there are so many of us like that. And I realized I had to, if I wrote like 1 to 2 books a year, that it just kept the income steady, and you know, and it's gotten better actually over the years, but slowly. But at least it keeps it steady if you just keep at least 1 to 2 books a year. And so I was doing that, cranking them out. In the last couple of years, because I moved to Texas, big move, big change in life, and I wrote a couple of movies. I was only getting like 1 book a year for the last couple of years, and this year I'm only gonna have 1 book done too by the end of the year. But because of the movies I've
But you have a movie.
Yeah.
But that's outstanding. I just want to say, like, you basically answered any question I could have had. You know, you the clout from having a movie out there helped you get published. You know, the struggling, but the consistency. That's so awesome.
Yeah, it really is.
mean,
And if you are a writer and such, don't even bother with traditional publishing. They're only interested in. I'm serious. They're only interested in celebrities now. And so what that means is like, well, who are you? What have you done that makes you famous? And what's your audience? What's your audience pull and all this? You end up having to do all the marketing yourself anyway. And this is not exaggeration, unless you're a celebrity. Yes, of course, if you're some, you know, whatever, Christian movie star or something, you know, and you have a book, they're going to put money into advertising it, but not when you're just a good average writer, like doing, and especially not for fiction, right? So you have to do all the work for marketing anyway. They're going to rely on you. So it's like, well, why bother with them? And yeah, there might be a little bit more, they might afford you a little bit wider initial exposure, but just to get started, but it drops off so quickly, and it's better to build a career slowly and because it's the long term that matters if you're going to be a writer, and it's writing series and getting known, and you have to do it's a full-time job, and you got to market, got to do a lot of marketing and spend a lot of money to make money, but
record your audiobooks.
Yep. I
mean, you do the voice of your own audiobooks, or
right? But I do hire
one I've listened to.
I do all of them myself, and it was because like I couldn't afford an actor to do it, right? So I had to do it. Not everyone has an okay voice though, so you just have to be honest. Ask some people to be honest, and you know, see if you do have the kind of voice that works. I'm a public speaker, so I'm pretty good at that, but I do have to hire a studio to record it, and they do all the mixing and stuff because I don't want to learn all that on my own. It's too much work, you know.
Yeah.
One benefit of listening to you is I started reading Noah Primeval, and then it was great. But I did wonder about a lot of the pronunciations of the names. When I saw that you read the audiobook yourself, I was like, I'll get right from his mouth how these are supposed to be. So I flipped and I started listening to it because I wanted.
I don't know if I'm always right, but I don't know if
you're the author, right, but, so it's right.
Yeah, yes.
I will say, I remembered one time that you said Gabriel instead of Gabrielle, and I was like, see, everyone has their thing. Well, so it was so funny. I will say, it was great to hear. My wife was like, she goes, Mikael is fine. She said Raphael is fine, Uriel is fine, but
Gabrielle
I
sounds like a
hate
girl.
Gabrielle. I hate Gabrielle. And I'm like, no, I get that. But
Well,
I
you
will
know-
say the most powerful moment for me, which spoiler alert, read it anyway. In
Noah Primeval?
Noah,
Yeah.
in Noah was when right before Methuselah passed, and he revealed he knew the name of God, because my wife was like, why are they calling him Elohim? Why are they? I was like, because they haven't been given his name yet. We haven't hit Moses yet. We don't have that. Well, and not even his name, the way we tell people who he is. We don't even have that yet.
Yep.
So that moment when he said, my dad told me his name and he
that's cool.
used it. Oh God, like chills, dude. Oh.
That's cool.
Oh man. I well, and that's the thing. Like I finished listening to that and I was like, I need to get this back on the calendar. I need to talk to this dude because there's so much. I have a lot of questions, but I've tried to sit down and write a book about 90 times. In fact, the last time I sat down to write a book, I've been doing this podcast thing for how many years, Ryan? Since what, 2016?
Right?
Well, this particular iteration says 2019, but 2016 is when I started.
Yeah, you did the earlier episodes.
Yeah. I've been
Those were
doing this
something.
for, good Lord, years now. But what's funny is I started writing that book, and that's what changed the podcast completely, because before it was very political and all of that. But I started writing my book, and in it I quoted Jack Kerouac, which is where I get the name The Mad Ones from, because I love that quote from I haven't read the whole book, but that one quote, the only people for me are the mad ones, those who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time, the ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles exploding like spiders across the stars. Oh, it just hits me. And so I was doing the introduction to this book, and I was like, this is what I need to be doing. I need to be talking to the mad ones, the ones who never yawn, And so like every day I need to sit down and write, but God's given me a voice for some reason. And he's like, use this thing for now. We'll figure out the writing thing later, even though you're called to write as well. But
Sure.
dude, I was like so stoked to talk to you. And I'm like, I'm not even joking. In my introduction, I was like, I want to be friends with him. And that's not a joke. I want to learn from you, brother. But I have a question, because I wrote, like I said, I studied screenwriting in school before I did biblical studies. And so I've written plenty of scripts. And the only ones that have been made are the ones I made myself. They weren't good because I'm not a director. I'm a screenwriter.
That's okay. That's okay.
I mean, it was fine, but it's like, I would much rather write. But what's hard for me was I would sit down and write, and I'm writing out my own story. And what tended to happen was I would be sitting and writing something that was outlandish, fantastical, but it would have that part of me that God was working on. And so like I would be going through this story and these emotions and these actions and all these things that I thought I wanted to do. And then at the end of my script, at the end of my story, I would have learned a lesson that God was teaching me. And then I wouldn't finish it, because I learned what I needed to learn. And, maybe someone else will one day, maybe I'll get back to it. But I have to know, having written scripts and only having one made, and I was the dumb who made it. What is it like writing a feature-length script and having someone make it and have Jack Bauer be in that movie? Like, it's wild. Like, how did you feel as you did that, as it came to fruition? Because, like I said, I've only ever done it myself, and I would not do it again.
Yeah. Well, it was exciting, and he wasn't famous at the time when we started that movie.
Yeah, his father was.
Yeah, it was out, I think, but it hadn't become. It hadn't
Done
won the
some
Emmys.
fun movies.
In fact, it won the Emmy right around the time, right before the movie was coming out. So when we were shooting it, yeah, obviously we knew Kiefer Sutherland, but he wasn't as famous. And actually, Mark Strong is more famous than him. He started out in our movie, right?
Dude,
so we had
was
a great
that his
cast.
first movie?
Not his first movie, but I think it was one of his breakouts.
Dude.
From there, that he got more American movies.
I started watching that last night. I haven't finished it yet because I fell asleep because I'm an old man. But I saw Mark Strong and I'm like, I love this dude.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
And the idea of the church without walls. I mean, I haven't gotten past that, but that just that idea, the church without walls.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it so much. Ecclesia, the gathering.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, the thing about that is I'm not really I don't want to say the bad word. I'm not really a movie star worshiper type of guy. I don't really care much about him. And I did meet him, but it was more exciting to meet there were actors who had acted in Akira Kurosawa movies. He was a famous Japanese director, did the Seven Samurai and movies like that. That was cool meeting them.
Oh yeah.
But my most encouraging moment, because I was there for some of the shooting, my most exciting moment was I was sitting in the canteen tent, was a small little place, and there's all these extras, and they don't tell extras about the script. They just tell them, you're prisoners of war, do this or that, right? So they're like, I'm in there getting a snack, and there's a handful of them there, and they're talking. They're like, what is this movie about anyway, right? And I'm like, well, I wrote it, so let me tell you. And I got to share the gospel with all these extras, and it was just really fun.
Wow,
and
that's cool.
Awesome.
And honestly, that was like one of the most meaningful experiences that I had there. And I did hear that, some of the Christian actors or Christians who were on the set they shared with several of the lead actors, including Kiefer and stuff, and that was kind of cool. But it was exciting, but making a movie is very boring, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you see it on the big screen. It's actually more boring in real life. It's weird, but and a lot of stuff is just talking. Maybe you might do an exciting stunt or something occasionally, but a lot of it's not. It's just shooting, walking around, doing this and that, and they redo many takes, and then they have equipment problems, so you're sitting around. So there's a lot of if you're not involved, you're just sitting around waiting, and almost nothing happens most of the time. So,
well, even if
not
you
that
are
interesting.
involved, like I've taken part in a couple of feature films, and I had my little job, and it was just I don't want to do that. It's awful. But
Yeah.
there is one. I won't retell the story, but Ryan will know what I'm talking about. There was one time I worked
You could retell the story
on a film with a specific actor who I now would fight if I had the chance. No, I really wouldn't fight him, but Sean Astin.
freaking Sean Astin, man.
Have I told you that story, Coop?
You brought it up the last time I was on the show, but you need to regale everybody with it again. But just keep it the short version. Keep it short and funny. It was hilarious, and
Yeah. So I'll tell you this real quick. This is a common feature, and it's been on part of my show for the last 8 years, on and off. But I was called because I used to have longer hair. Right now I'm growing it back. But I looked like just a biker. Which is what I look like. I have a motorcycle. I looked the part.
Yeah.
I got called, and it was, I forget who directed the film, but they were like, hey, we need actors. We need featured extras to play motorcycle club members. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. And they're like, they want you to be in the front because you've got the long hair, you've got the long beard, you've got the look, whatever. I'm like, cool. And I get there and I meet Sean Astin, and I'm starstruck because I love Lord of the Rings. There is nothing, no movies I love more on this planet than the Lord of the Rings, except for maybe Braveheart, which is horribly historically inaccurate, by the way. But I meet Sean Astin. He's like, hey, can I ride your motorcycle? I just put some new parts on it. I was very happy with my motorcycle at that point in my life. And he said, I've been working with Harley. I'm insured. I would love to ride your bike. I just think it's the best looking bike out here. It's like, in my head, I was like, no. But outside, I was like starstruck. I was like, okay. Sean Astin took my motorcycle and rode it around to the point where when we went to the set, the secondary location to actually start shooting, he was still riding my motorcycle. And excuse my French here, it's just the common parlance. I had to ride bitch with someone I didn't know to the set, and I was not happy about that. In general, because I've never done that before. I've never been in that situation before. I don't like it. But I get there and I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. And I get a call from my friend who's a PA, and he says, hey, they want you to come back and get your bike. Sean wants to give it back to you. Whatever. And I was like, okay, come pick me up. Let me get my bike. We're riding back. And he goes, I have bad news. And I was like, I'm not going to be featured extra anymore. And he goes, well, yeah, there's that. And I was like, what do you, I was like, it's more than that. And he's like, yeah, there's more than that. And he said, yeah, since you didn't have your bike, you were late. And so you don't get to be a featured extra anymore. You don't get to be in the scene. And I was very frustrated. I was frustrated I was like, but fine, just take me to my bike. Let me go home. And he goes, but Sean was riding your bike and he dropped it. And I was like, what? I just put like $400 worth of parts on this stupid bike.
That's what you get for star effing.
Right? I don't do it anymore. I do not do that anymore. But no, so I got back in and I was like, just give me my keys, let me go. He goes, no, Sean wants to give you your keys back and he wants to apologize. I'm like, oh, that's a stand-up thing. How great. Maybe he'll throw me whatever he messed up in cash so I can fix it, right? I get there. Sean Astin, I walk up and I look at my bike before I see him. I go to his trailer, and literally out of the 9 out of 10 of the parts that I had just put on were scuffed and messed up. Oh, so mad. I was so mad. And so I walk up and I knock on the trailer. Sean Astin comes out and he goes, oh, here are your keys. And I was like, he's going to apologize. He's going to have to pay for this. You know, I just put these things on myself. I'm very proud of it. And he goes, this dude looks at me, Brian, and he says, hey, let me ask you a question. Thanks for letting me ride your bike, by the way. Here's a question. When you're riding and you come to a stop, what do you do so that the motorcycle doesn't fall down when you come to a stop? And I said,
oh my God.
And I said, well, Sean, you put your feet, those things below you that are holding you up right now, you put them on the ground and then it doesn't fall.
Oh my God. At least if he would have wiped out on gravel or something, but like something stupid ass like that.
It was so stupid. And this dude pretended like it didn't happen. He acted like it was full on hypothetical. And I was like, okay, I'm leaving.
So what you learned is that all the stars are assholes.
Yes,
all of them. All of them.
Yes,
except
100%.
Keanu Reeves. But other than Keanu Reeves, all of them are assholes. They really are, in one way or another. And it's horrible to work with those people.
I'm just saying, man. Like I loved you, Sean Astin, but you cannot ruin Lord of the Rings. You cannot ruin Lord of the Rings.
He'll always be Rudy to me.
Yeah.
There's a good
he was
redemption
good,
story.
Rudy, yeah.
Goonies never say die.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you don't know my story, that's the last time I'm going to tell it this year. If someone asks about it again, it'll be a year.
I'm going to call you out on that when you try to tell it again.
Dude, I'm just saying. I feel like I needed to tell Brian my story.
I mean,
that was cool.
It's very apropos. It really is.
But no, I appreciate you so much for coming on and being, just candid and talking about all these things. I'm super interested in you and your work and what you're doing. And I'm going to read all of those books, dude. And I hope you know that I'm going to message you when different parts hit me really deeply.
Please do. No, really. I do respond to all my fan mails or whatever you call them.
Can I just say the funniest thing happened with you was I messaged you about the show. And you were the first person I've ever messaged outside of like my clique or whatever that kind of knew who I was when I messaged you. It was so funny to me. I was like, wait, you saw the Tucker thing. How cool.
I forgot about that. Oh,
good old Tucker, man. I finally found that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I have so many more questions. I'm going to want to pick your brain some more. And honestly, I really do want to figure out how to do something and work with you on something. Cause you can say no, But I'm just saying I am so interested in what you've done, and I'd love to pick your brain more. It's on the show later for sure, if
Sure.
not anything else.
Well, my latest movie just came out. Maybe if you want to have me on again later, I don't know if it's still around, but my latest movie came out. It's called My Son Hunter.
I saw you
curious
tweet
about
about
that.
this.
It is the movie made it's a political satire. It's not a documentary about Hunter Biden's laptop, and I wrote it,
Lord.
and it's my baby. My idea. I wrote it, and I'm proud of the writing. It was a low budget movie, and I had some creative differences, shall we say, with the director and producers. But anyway, you can watch that at mysonhunter.com, and it's actually being distributed by Breitbart. But it is very political and all that kind of stuff. So if you don't want to talk about politics, that's fine with me. I don't care.
Oh no, we can talk about that.
I wanted to ask about that. I was curious when I saw it.
Yeah.
Just so you know,
wait,
like
some Breitbart documentary about
no.
And then I saw your name and I went, wait, what?
Yeah.
Now I'm interested.
We made the movie, and then they found a distributor. So basically, it's like they would go around to what conservative powerhouses are there out there who could help us distribute? Because the people who made this movie, they're just little independent filmmakers, and so we didn't have distribution. And the best one they found, and Breitbart has a big huge audience, right? So yeah, Breitbart was willing to take it up, and yeah, they make it look like it's their movie, but they're just distributing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely going to watch it because I don't necessarily do political stuff on this show anymore or in life in general.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of full on in the kingdom right now. That's where I am.
Says the guy who was on Tucker Carlson just recently.
It's true. I was in Tucker.
I was on political.
I was on.
In front of
Well,
millions of
also,
people.
I'm essentially the co-host of the Propaganda Report, where I make fun of Hunter Biden every chance I get. So it's like
okay.
it's like I don't do it here, but
Yeah.
I'm all about bringing out the lies and showing where the lies are.
Yeah, well, the thing about the movie is though it's done very creatively. Because it's a lot of information that would be boring, and I'm about entertaining, and so we could talk a lot about the creativity of it, and
Dude,
it'd be fine.
I am 100% down to talk about that, and I need to watch it. But that video of him in the sauna, did you see that one?
No.
Oh boy, I had some fun with that one.
You probably know more about it than I do.
Hunter's gross.
After I finished writing it, I moved on to other stuff, and I don't want to hear any more about Hunter Biden.
Moved on quick. Yeah.
Oh boy. I appreciate you coming on. Do you have any
Thanks
other
for having me,
questions
No,
guys
other
want to
than
ask?
other than just to tell people, all my books are in audio, paperback, and Kindle on Amazon exclusively.
Yeah.
And
And I will say you can grab a copy of Noah Primeval in all of those forms in the description. So it'll be on the website. It'll be below me below us in YouTube, Rockfin, etc.
And then my website, which is Godawa.com, my name, GODAWA.com. I make it I try to make it an interesting, entertaining website, not just informative. So I've got a lot of interesting things there. Like, for instance, I cast my novels. I have little pictures that I find for the characters and tell a little bit about characters for most all the novels and such. And then also a lot of scholarly articles that you refer to in my research. That you can still get for free and stuff. And there's also some free books, online books that you can get digital, in some of those as well. So yeah, if you want to find out more about me, go there.
All I'm saying is if you don't use me as some villain, at some point I'm going to be truly disappointed.
Dude, the writer has nothing. The writer has no power. Is not known. Nobody even knows I wrote that movie barely.
No, I'm talking about like for you said you cast your stories, your novels.
Oh, yeah,
I'm just
gotcha.
saying, I need to be a villain because that's
send me your headshots.
He needs to be like Gilgamesh's high priest or something.
Yeah.
One of those really
Something really cool. Yeah.
one of those really flamboyant characters.
I have one more big question for you.
Sure.
But before we do that, Ryan, Coop, do you have any questions that you'd like to clear up with Brian before we do
I
the
wanted to
thing.
ask about that Hunter Biden thing when I realized that
Go
was
for
him,
it.
but no, he just talked about it, so we're good.
Cool.
Let's see. I wrote down a few things, but really, I really thank you for taking this time with us.
Sure.
You really answered a lot of the questions I had, and
Great.
I really pray that it'd be awesome. Like, we live in the days when Dr. Michael Heiser is like the superstar of theology right now.
And
It would
God
be-
bless him.
it
He
would-
has cancer right now.
Oh
Yeah,
man,
his
keep
pancreatic.
him in prayers. And
Please do pray.
but it would
It's
be
not
so
good.
wonderful now to see your books get picked up into like series. But that
Yeah,
is
not going to
you know,
happen.
no.
Too expensive. Too expensive. Too Christian for Hollywood and too
Oh,
expensive.
man,
You know.
yeah.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, you really did such a thorough job. I really thank you. I mean,
Thanks.
you answered most of the questions I would have had.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I gotta, man, I'm so excited to get into Enoch now, which, by the way, I also just want to do an episode with you talking about ancient cosmology, because that's one of my loves right now. And also the concept of Sheol, all of that, like seeing you put it into reality was so fascinating to me. I love all of that. And the one point that I was going to make earlier, and I've talked to Coop about this before, which I'm going to call you Coop exclusively now.
That's
so
completely
you know.
fine. Everybody else in my entire military career and whatnot did.
Yeah,
so
it's a great nickname, man. Cool.
But
Just call me God.
I will.
Just kidding.
Well, no, that's what's funny is like I haven't talked. I think I may have talked to Coop about this, but we definitely talked about how I believe the word hell is such an unhelpful word.
Yes,
And
I agree. I agree.
I think God is also one of those that borders on unhelpful,
Yeah.
and soul 100% unhelpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, I love talking about those finer details. And so
Yes.
if you ever are interested in that kind of conversation, let me know.
to these modern rational people, soul is like this uncorporeal thing. But to these ancient people, this is every bit mystical too.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's
Absolutely.
that's what's awesome
Amen.
about your work.
Very well put.
Very well put. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you the big question. We do this on every episode. When I rebranded it as the Mad Ones, it was in the midst of the COVID response that the government had. Let's put it that way. And, you know, I had a lot of people that I knew that devolved into a horrible life, depression. I had friends who killed themselves. I had people who lost all sorts of things. And so there was a lot of desperation going on. And I noticed in my friend groups, there was a lot of frustration. And I was like, I don't want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of the solution to that, which is hope. And, you know, obviously the ultimate hope is the resurrection of the body in the end and the marriage of heaven and earth. But what I like to do on this show is to leave everyone with a little bit of hope. And so I like to ask every person who comes on, what's something, it can be in your life very personally, it can be global, it can be state level, whatever, it can be anything. What's something right now in your life that gives you hope and motivation to carry on? What's your silver lining?
Well, the easy route is my wife, because my wife is, you know, truly the love of my life. She's when all else sucks, you know, she loves me. We don't have any kids, so she's all I got.
I'll give
in this
you
life. Yeah. I've seen your kids. They look cute though. I'm sure they're little demons at times, right? They can be angels and demons.
Yeah,
They're little troublesome elements.
Yeah.
little
But-
Azazels.
Yeah. Little Azazels, yeah. So, I mean, and that's real. I mean, I really mean that, because, you know, I work so hard, and she's there. She's a lot of my happiness and such.
Yeah.
But also she's the best example of Christ's sacrificial love and giving to people. So, you know, that's I really mean that. But of course that's the easy one. We should all say that if we're married, right?
Right.
But it really is true. But, you know, I was just talking to another brother about this today, and I would have to say that the thing that has driven my whole life with passion for vision and is the kingdom of God. And what I mean by that is like that we are a part of a kingdom, and this is Daniel, right? Daniel 2. We are part of a kingdom that is growing to fill the earth, right? And
Yeah.
it will be victorious, as Daniel says. It will be victorious, and we'll be a part of that. And so my understanding of how that's what we're a part of, you know, the Danielic kingdom of God on earth, and his church, his people are the ones that it grows through, and all that stuff. Well, that's the thing that drives me. That's the higher cause that I'm committed to, that keeps me going, that gives me meaning in my life. And I even have Christians in my life who are like struggling with finding meaning, you know. So, oh, God's my job. And, you know, they go to church and they pray, they read the Bible, but it's just like, oh, you know, I'm looking for, I can't tell you the amount of Christians, you know, I just feel empty and I feel like I need a purpose. And like, what? Like,
Right.
You're part of the kingdom of God. Do something. Get a vision to do something, you know, for the
Right.
kingdom. And that's where you find that meaning and purpose. And all my stories are, of course, about that. So as I'm writing, I'm studying the Bible sometimes 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day. You know, I'm privileged in that sense. But even before I was doing that, you know, that the fact that we are part of a victorious kingdom of God is that hopeful, and especially through these hard times that get so bad that you just go, man, you know,
Yeah. I feel you.
can it get any worse?
Right.
So, yeah. So,
It's beautifully already, but not yet.
yeah.
And I'm in full agreement with you on that. Like I said, I used to do a lot more political stuff, and I don't anymore because kingdom, man.
Yeah.
Freaking kingdom.
Yeah.
And that's why I love being able to hang out with Ryan and Coop digitally at this point. But these are people that think, and they exercise the kingdom, and man, it's so beautiful. Jesus used a lot of Jubilee language when he was on earth.
Yeah.
And that is where we should be living, is in the kingdom, in the Jubilee.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on. I want to
for
talk
having me.
again. I want to talk more.
You bet.
I appreciate you very much. Like you said before, I'll go ahead and give them a rundown. If you would like to read Noah Primeval or any of his other books that he has self-published, they're on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. You can read them for free.
Yeah.
If you have Audible, I mean, by all means, get a free subscription to that and get the free book and listen to him read Noah Primeval. It's well worth it. And so all of the links that I have, which are my what's the word, associate links or whatever, so I get a little cash off of it if you buy it through those links, so go to those. And those are below. If you'd like to check out his Twitter and what he's doing, I don't know how often he uses it, but you can do that at Brian Godawa. That's where I got in touch with you. So
that's true. But Facebook, I'm more on Facebook than I would be on Twitter. But yeah.
Yeah. And also you can go to godawa.com.
Yeah.
Like I said, all of these links are down below. Again, thank you so much. I'll let you go get back to the light of your life and your love. And thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
See ya. All right. So for the rest of you, I have to do the cleanup. Got to do the things. So Coop's going to come back for a couple episodes. I don't know how many. I'm just sending the people that I gel with well and are smart. It's like Ryan and Cody and everyone. Like, if anyone wants to be a part of the show, that's, you know, don't send me. PP Steve said, everyone text Cam a Sean Astin gif. And my mother said, done. Not okay. But no, so we're going to have some really cool stuff. And I wanted to go ahead and let people know what's going on with that. If I can find my document where I have everything written down. There it is. Okay, so next week, I don't know if you know this, Ryan. I think you know this, Coop. But we talked to a guy named Nick Quint a month or two ago about women in the ministry and if they have a place in it. And he took the proposition that women should be brought into the ministry. And I decided, let's find a hardline Calvinist. Let's find someone who disagrees vociferously, and let's have him do a rebuttal. And so next week, I'm going to be talking to a guy I know from college, a friend named Nick Potts, who works for the Gospel Forum, and he's gonna disagree. And so we're going to do that, and I'm going to hear his case. I think it's worth hearing both cases and not having a debate, because I don't like debates. I'm not into that.
Debates are pointless. Can a debate affect the truth? No, it cannot. No, it cannot.
And so after that, Nick's actually going to come the next night, because I had asked him to come on, because not only did he have that stance, but previously he was a Universalist, and he has gone away from Universalism. And I want to hear his best case for Universalism and why he decided that wasn't the case. And so he's going to be coming right after that. And then I have Naomi Wright coming on, and I'm not sure, but I feel like Jessica might be coming back for that one. I don't know. But her dad was a cult leader. He started his own cult, polygamous cult. And she got out of that life after a while, and she's still Christian, which is wild, because most of the time, like when we talked to Ben Brown, who was part of a Mormon polygamous cult, he's definitely not Mormon or Christian or anything now. But she kept with the faith, and that fascinates me. And then after that, Coop's coming back. We're going to be talking to our boy Izzy Centric, Israel Petty, about he is a self-described paranormal researcher and demonologist. This was going to be an October episode, but I took a break. We're going to do it. It's going to be fun. Beyond that,
get ready, because it's going to be weird.
I hope so. This one was weird. Let's make it weirder.
It's going to be super weird. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be super fun.
Ryan, you were on Twitter at Technoagrist. Do you want to, if you want to listen to his show that he hasn't done in a while, you can go to technoagrist.com.
In a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a hot minute.
Come on, man.
Is there anything else you want people to know? I don't think there is, but you can go to,
not really.
What's your website? howtoprayintongues.com.
From a long time ago. Let's just stick with Technoagrist on Twitter.
And then Coop is, of course, on TikTok. That's where I met him. That's where he does a lot of work. He's also on Instagram. He's not on Twitter, which I don't understand.
I don't, that's a real debate
it.
sphere, and I'm an angry enough person as it is. You probably couldn't tell from this episode.
It's not. So it's only a debate sphere if you choose to be that way. You can just mock people and have fun.
You lie.
That's what I do.
You lie. I'm just kidding.
I have so much fun on that daggum website.
Hey,
but you can find Coop anywhere at The Muted Flag.
That's right.
And you have a YouTube channel? Is that up yet?
Yes.
Or
No, I do have a YouTube channel. It does not. I'm at 93 subscribers. I do not have I do not have a unique URL. But if you search my channel, The Muted Flag, on YouTube, you will see it. And I'm going to be starting to put out some YouTube specific content here pretty soon. So,
guys, how many did you said? 93.
93, 7 short. And thanks, bro.
7.
6
all
more,
of you,
so I get a unique URL.
All of you who are listening, go and subscribe to his YouTube channel so we can get a unique URL. I remember when I got mine, I was so thrilled, dude.
I'm going to have to do the PewDiePie 100 special. I'm going to have to play Call of Duty and just be like, I got 100 subscribers. But
so yeah, at The Muted Flag everywhere. For me, patreon.com/themadOnes if you want to help keep this thing going, if you want to keep the coffers full and help us pay for all of the dumb things I have to pay for, which luckily I have a good friend in Ryan who helps with a lot of this stuff, and I'm truly grateful for Ryan. Patreon.com/themadOnes. I will be resurrecting monthly Zoom hangouts, parties, games, etc. very soon. So patreon.com/themadOnes for that. I will be dropping a new tank top, which I think is funny. I just love the tank tops. But no, it's a tank top that I designed in conjunction with Brad Binkley from the Propaganda Report, because there's an inside joke that we're black tank top bros in the Black Tank Top Club because of something that happened very early on when we started working together, and everyone talks about it that's a fan of that show. And so now you're going to be able to be a part of it and have a really pretty cool looking tank top that I designed. But if you want that or any of the shirts that I have designed, my wife has designed one that is more female centric. You can go to wearethemadOnes.com/store. I, of course, am on Twitter most of the day at HamCarlos because Justin Trudeau's a little butthole and I lost at Cam Harless. I'm on TikTok at Cam Harless. You don't have to go there. I don't do much there. I just talk to my buddies on TikTok and make fun of Judaizers. If you're listening, you can watch weekly Thursdays, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time on youtube.com/themadOnes. Ryan, you have to give me the Odyssey or let me into Odyssey so I can continue live streaming there because I got kicked out and I don't know how to get on. It said it sent you an email, but so this week, probably not on Odyssey, but we're also on Rockfin. It will automatically upload to Rumble. If you want to watch, you can basically anywhere you want to. If you would rather listen, every podcatcher or wearethemadOnes.com. Or you can actually, no, you can't anymore. I was going to say my project with Ryan, but I'm pretty sure that website doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, no, we took that down for the time being. So eventually it'll come back up and it'll be automated and it'll work a lot better, but not yet.
Well, I appreciate the both of you. I'm glad you both got to come because you both had questions that I didn't have and thoughts that I didn't have. And I love when there's a collaborative sense of filling the gaps because I'm just like ancient cosmology. Let's please talk about ancient cosmology. And y'all are like movies and writing. And I'm like, perfect. This is great. Wonderful. Thank you both for coming on.
For having me on. It's a blast.
Absolutely. I'll figure out, I don't know if there's anything. I'll show you my list of episodes coming up. If you're interested in any of them, Ryan, just let me know. But thank you. The rest of you, I'm going to close this out now because everything is done. As always, my good friends, you have a chance to be a light in the world. So go light it up.